Hello and welcome to the Adventures of George Washington. I am your host, Professor Worthington. From boyhood into maturity, George Washington was a lifelong student of history. His political views were shaped by mystical tales from the Far East, the Stoic thinkers of Greece and Rome, the Age of Enlightenment in Europe, and the dramatic events of England's past. In this episode, we delve deeper into his grasp of the Protestant Reformation in England, a perspective formed chiefly by reading Tobias Smollett's A Complete History of England. But enough from me, let's have George tell you the story.
Today, I am going to read about the Protestant Reformation.
Having just read about King Edward VI, I'll now read the chapters on his sisters, Mary and Elizabeth. In 1553, following the death of King Edward VI and the failed attempt to transfer the crown to Lady Jane Grey, Edward's elder half-sister, Mary Tudor became Queen Mary I. She was the daughter of Henry VIII and his first wife Catherine of Aragon, and like her mother, she was a devout Catholic. Mary wanted to reverse the Protestant reforms and return England to Catholicism, but her advisors urged her to proceed with caution. One of her first acts was to issue a proclamation professing her own Catholic faith, but promising to allow religious freedom unless Parliament decided otherwise. She then packed Parliament with a majority of Catholic representatives, which proceeded to pass laws re-establishing the authority of the Pope and forbidding some practices of Protestant worship, including the marriage of priests, but stopping short of returning property formerly owned by the Church, which was now in the hands of English politicians and nobles. Less than 2 months after her coronation, she imprisoned Lady Jane Grey and several Protestant ministers, including Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who orchestrated the annulment between Henry VIII and her mother. All were found guilty and sentenced to death. Lady Jane was beheaded in February of 1554, and over the next year, 13 priests and 4 bishops, all of the Protestant religion, were burned at the stake. In an attempt to save his own life, Thomas Cranmer recanted his Protestant beliefs and recognized the Pope as the head of the Church. In spite of these attempts, Queen Mary insisted that Cranmer be put to death, and March of 1556, he was burned as a heretic. On the morning of his execution, he renounced the Catholic faith and once again confirmed his Protestant beliefs. During this time, the Queen and Parliament passed an act declaring Mary's Protestant sister Elizabeth to be illegitimate, thereby making her ineligible for the throne. To strengthen the ties between England and Catholicism, the Queen married the Catholic Prince Philip of Spain and later appointed Reginald Pole, a Catholic priest, as the Archbishop of Canterbury. Additionally, she imprisoned many Protestants whom she suspected of trying to depose her, including her half-sister Elizabeth, a move that proved very unpopular with most of England. However, Philip, understanding the need to win the affections of his newly acquired subjects in England, convinced Mary to pardon Elizabeth after a year. This was one of the few small concessions made by Mary, and before the end of her time as England's sovereign ruler, she had ordered the brutal executions of 284 prominent Protestants who refused to recant their faith, thus earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Only the wealth and status of the nobility class slowed the pace at which Mary tried to return England to the religious practices of the time before Henry VIII. She relied on their public backing and used their control of financial and social networks to expand her influence and power. In return, these titans of the business world accepted her policies with outward compliance, while bargaining privately for guarantees that their estates, incomes, and advantages would remain untouched. So long as Mary preserved their fortunes and honored their privileges, they muted dissent, lent crucial support, and let her remake the government as she wished. In 1557, Mary and Philip declared war on France, a move which jeopardized England's relationship with the Vatican because the Pope supported King Henry II of France. The strain of the conflict with France, the fallout from England's religious turmoil, and the physical toll of a likely miscarriage left Mary gravely ill, and as a result, she died on November 17, 1558, at the age of 42. In spite of Bloody Mary's attempts to declare her younger half-sister an illegitimate heir to the throne, the 25-year-old Elizabeth took the crown and promptly reversed Mary's policies, returning England to Protestantism and claiming her supremacy over the Church as her father King Henry VIII had done. Queen Elizabeth I tolerated Catholics to an extent, but was wary that empowering them might threaten her rule. Also, like her father, she pursued a cautious middle path that favored Protestant reforms without provoking Catholic backlash. The fundamentalist Puritan movement, whom she judged too radical and disruptive, was singled out as intolerably insolent and troublesome. The specter of religion also threatened Elizabeth's governance by way of her Catholic cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, not to be confused with Elizabeth's late sister, Bloody Mary. Mary Queen of Scots, like Elizabeth, was a direct descendant of King Henry VII. She was the granddaughter of King James IV of Scotland and his wife, Margaret Tudor, who was the daughter of King Henry VII. This royal bloodline gave her a plausible claim to the English throne and made her the preferred choice of many Catholics in England, turning the relationship between the two queens into one of cooperation when necessary and mistrust at all times. The reign of Mary Queen of Scots ended in 1567 when a group of rebellious Protestant lords organized a revolt, captured the queen, and imprisoned her in a castle on an island in the middle of Loch Leven. Despite their tense relationship, Elizabeth condemned the rebellion of the nobles as an unforgivable breach of social order. In the mind of Elizabeth, it was acceptable for two sovereigns to disagree, but not for the people to disagree with their ruler. During her confinement, Mary was forced to abdicate the Scottish throne to her one-year-old son, James VI, whose upbringing was entrusted to a Protestant regency until he reached the age of majority. With the help of some of her supporters at Loch Leven Castle, Mary Queen of Scots escaped and fled to England, expecting Elizabeth's help in regaining her position in Scotland, but instead she was confined to Carlisle Castle, a safe distance between her enemies in Scotland and Elizabeth in London. Queen Elizabeth I wanted neither to see Mary executed nor to have her incite a Catholic rebellion in England. In 1569, Elizabeth attempted to negotiate Mary's return to Scotland for assurances that the Protestant religion would be secured, but this attempt ultimately failed due in part to a Catholic rebellion in the northern part of England. In 1579, the 13-year-old James was declared to be of legal age, thus ending his regency, though he would not gain full control of Scotland's government until 1583. 3 years after becoming his nation's sovereign ruler, he and Elizabeth signed the Treaty of Berwick, intentionally intertwining the interests of England and Scotland. Both monarchs agreed to defend the Protestant religion against all its enemies in either kingdom, provide military assistance should either country be invaded, and consult with each other before making treaties with any other nations. Since Elizabeth had no heirs, this agreement effectively paved the way for James to inherit the English throne upon her death. Given that Queen Elizabeth I never married or left an heir, she became forever known by the evocative title, the Virgin Queen. Soon after the treaty was ratified, the English government uncovered a plot to assassinate Elizabeth that implicated Mary. Mary stood trial, was convicted, and condemned to death. The sentence explicitly stated that her conviction would not impair her son's legitimacy in Scotland or his future claim to England. James, intent on his eventual succession, made only a token effort to save his mother. Elizabeth, reluctant to be seen as directly responsible for a queen's execution and fearful of Catholic retaliation, stalled the process until Parliament's pressure forced her to sign the death warrant on February 1, 1587. On February 7, 1587, the day before her execution, a nobleman supervising the sentence told Mary that her death would secure the life of the Protestant faith. Mary, Queen of Scots, answered that the remark proved she was being killed solely in the name of religion and not for any crime against England. After Mary was executed on February 8, 1587, Elizabeth sought to distance herself, claiming a minister had delivered the warrant without her consent. The minister was later imprisoned for 19 months to placate James and the Catholics in both England and Scotland. During this same time, King Philip II of Spain, the Virgin Queen's former brother-in-law, entered into an alliance with the Catholic League of France in an effort to gain control of the Netherlands. Elizabeth feared that this Catholic alliance was an attempt to remove Protestantism in Europe and potentially invade England. In response, she signed the Treaty of Nonsuch in 1585, backing Dutch rebels who opposed King Philip's rule in the Low Countries. By supporting the right of subjects to rebel against their king, Elizabeth was contradicting her earlier stance that the common people had no right to rebel against sovereign rulers. The Treaty of Nonsuch launched a long, bitter series of conflicts between England and Spain that would continue until the Treaty of London in 1604. While much of the conflict involved battles between the English fleet and Spanish Armada, the war included raids and battles in areas across the globe, such as Europe, North America, and South America. Of particular interest to King Philip was the strategy of inciting Catholic rebellions in Ireland. This effort continued to pay off even after his death in 1598. Some of Elizabeth's close associates believed that the stress from those rebellions helped trigger her final illness. While this may have been a contributing factor to the poor health she experienced at the end of her life, other stresses, such as increasing inflation and debt linked to the war with Spain, poor harvests, rising crime rates, and old age contributed as well. The Virgin Queen died in 1603 at the age of 69 after a reign of 44 years. This set the stage for James VI to become the ruler of both Scotland and England.
Thank you for watching. If you found the content useful or entertaining, please subscribe. Please see this video's description for additional information, including a list of references.